The thing that beauty and art and film and story and all these things do is they get in underneath rationalism, our mental defense, and they start speaking to your heart before your head and mind can like come up with all these excuses. And what I really wanted to do was say, listen, I'll be as honest as I can. I'll show as broken as I've been. And if I can show as bad as things were for me, it gives people this like, okay, I don't have to have my guard up reading this book because this guy was like the biggest hypocrite.
It's the AC Podcast. For the love of God, love people.
Hey everyone, welcome to the AC Podcast. My name is Troy. On my left, I'm here with my wonderful colleague, Wes Huff. And on my right, we have a special guest, Josh Nadeau. Josh, how you doing, man?
Yeah, very good.
Good. Wes, good to see you, man.
Yeah, I flew into BC 3 hours ago, so we're good.
I fell asleep on my Uber ride over. Just like drove over, passed out in the sun the whole way.
Yeah.
Got to Troy's sweaty.
But you're a local, but you're not a local.
Yeah, I'm like a very hard stone's throw away.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I flew in a van on Tuesday, and then Ubered over today.
Yeah.
West
And for
Coast.
those who don't know, it's Sword and Pencil on
True, on Instagram,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the gram.
on the
You see the little social thing? Yeah, follow it. Go ahead, do it. We're going to have a really good conversation today. Josh, again, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I personally have been following you. I swear, man, it's been, I want to say 3 years, something like that. And it was super exciting for me to find out that you were also Canadian. I was like, okay, let's go. Cause I'm, and I think nowadays, if you understand some of the tensions that people have towards different nations, we are very proudly Canadian.
Totally, it's nice. There's not a lot of Canadians in the space. It feels like.
Yeah. That's
So every time you bump shoulders with a Canadian, like, let's go.
Yeah. So one of the reasons we obviously initially connected is because, Josh, you wrote this book called Room for Good Things to Run Wild. And, so some people know you obviously for your social media, your art and that sort of thing. But as much as you're an illustrator or an artist, you're also now an author.
Officially.
Yeah. How does that feel?
It's really weird at first. Like I remember telling a guy at the park, our kids are playing. He's like, what do you do? I'm an author. A bit of imposter.
I'm an author.
I've developed a British accent, right? All the way back to Queens.
Or like a New England accent. I write books.
Quiet. Oh, sorry. Did I drop my feather pen?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Pass me that quill there.
Yeah. Feels good. I mean, like I love the art. I love drawing, love doing illustration. Mm-hmm. Writing to me feels like my true craft. I love it.
Okay.
And so it's my baby.
Yeah.
I mean, my inanimate baby.
Yes, because you got you and your wife, you actually just welcomed.
Our second.
Your second, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So you got 2 kids. You've been married. How long you been married?
10 years this year.
Nice. Congrats.
Strong, yeah.
Yeah, nice. August, right?
September 11th.
I do remember that.
What a day.
Yeah. We had a conversation about it because I'm 10 years in August, and I remember thinking like you were close.
Yeah, so close.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife and I, we just celebrated 10 last year. So
Come on.
we're all in the same vein.
Yeah.
Same.
It's nice. That's like the landmark.
Same window.
Yeah.
10 years. Yeah. And you're a Torontonian.
Yes.
If you go back far enough.
Totally. Yeah, so we...
Ontario listeners.
Yeah.
It's not just all BC.
It's not
although
West Coast.
we are on the West Coast right now.
Yeah.
But because I knew your brother
Yep.
years back. We connected a few times and met up. I found out even like good friends of ours, you were their roommate.
Yeah, yep.
You and your wife were.
What is happening here?
I know. There's
The
lots of
overlap
cross.
is
It's not just that we're Canadian.
I was going to say
It's
the
like
Canadian
that there's like a
allegations.
lot of overlap
Yeah.
in all these things.
In like the world, in the Christian world in Toronto. So I did my master's at Toronto Baptist Seminary.
Yeah.
Tons of people from your church world were there or are associated there.
Yeah.
And so, like the Venn diagram of our lives. But I knew of you, I think, maybe from my brother. But our paths never crossed. I was a very different person at that time too.
I knew of you, but I didn't know. I hadn't made the connection between you and Josh. Like
Me and
I
Nathan.
knew that you existed
Yeah.
and that he existed. But when I was like following your art,
You didn't connect.
I didn't make the connection.
Totally.
So, you're talking about just really quickly, you're like, at that time, I was a very different person.
Yeah.
Was that the person of this book?
Not when I was living with your friend. That was
Okay.
when we come back from. So it's not too many spoilers at the end of the book.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Toronto, I moved when I was 21, 22, starting my master's.
Yeah.
And then this book picks up in my first year of marriage. So that's like 2015.
Yeah. Okay. So I would love to get into, just briefly talking a little bit about this. What prompted, because there's so many ways you could have told your story.
Totally.
Right? And what God has obviously done in your life, but what prompted, man, I want to do a book. And, as you thought through that process, I want to do it this way. Because listeners, viewers, it's very personally done, super creatively done. I love the way you write and articulate things. So
Yeah, thank you. I always wanted to write a book. One of the reasons I did was like a publishing house reached out to me and made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I was like, yeah, of course, dream come true.
and this is because they saw the art.
They saw the art, they had read some of the essays I'd done,
Yes,
and they're like, okay, he's a writer. And then when I put together you have to do the full proposal. It was one of those moments where writing's a big deal for me, so I put my best foot forward, and a lot of it was just like an intellectual thing of proving that I knew the stuff and I could write something that was worth the reader's while. And when we had the follow-up, they were like, Josh, you could write this book. It would do great, it would be fine, but this isn't you. Like, do what you want to do. Like, write the book you want to write. And so what I wanted to do was, I think story is like a very powerful, maybe the most powerful way to connect with people. And if you can build trust with the reader, you have this ability to connect at a very deep and fundamental level. And so what I did when I was mapping out, when I was diagramming how I wanted the book to go, I had all these theological and philosophical ideas that were the underpinnings. And I was like, how does this narrative do this? And how can I connect people to truth, even though I'm not explicitly saying it? How can I show, not tell? It was a blast. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah. How long was that process?
Shorter than you think. I wrote it by hand. I did most of the first draft by hand, so it's in an old journal.
Oh, wow.
And then you'd have like...
Crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah, I'm old school.
As someone who is writing a dissertation on a laptop, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, well, the
writing anything.
dissertations are a different game. Yeah. Well, part
But
of
a
it,
book, like just the amount of just sitting down and writing.
there's something that like keeps you slow. And so Lewis has a quote where he was talking about, he was like dunking on typewriters. He's like, the clack, it's too fast, the ding, you don't get the scrape and slow of the pen. There's something really nice about when you're writing by hand, like you think slowly. So you have to ponder how and I'm like, I get very particular on craft where it's like cadence, how do the words sound together? If someone's reading it out loud, does it make sense? If someone's reading it in their mind, can they envision it? Can they live in it? And so what I wanted to do, the idea of using narrative for me was, if you are good at telling a story, every story gets translated onto the big story, like the Christ story.
Yeah.
And then story always resonates. People are like, we're narrative beings. And so every time you tell a good story, if you use the right language, I've had a couple people like, why would you just tell a testimony? I was like, I wouldn't say it that way. But if I do a good job, people begin to interpret their story through mine. They begin to think things that I'm thinking, giving them language for stuff that maybe they couldn't articulate.
Yeah. So at the start of this book, you're really unpacking it kind of like the slow way forward, right? And one of the things that sticks out to me the most was, how did you explain it? You talk about removing the organ.
Demanding the function.
Yeah, removing the organ, demanding the function. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, Lewis, that's from Abolition of Man. Lewis has this thing where he's talking about how we make men without chests. We remove all of these organs, so we remove the necessary conditions for the expression. So it's like, hey, build a house, but don't use a foundation. No can do. And the concept at that part of the book was I had removed my body. So I was living this, I think, I think one of the problems in the modern evangelical church is this functional Gnosticism. This idea, if I think the right thoughts, if I do the right quote unquote spiritual practices, which are generally disembodied, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And to back up, so the idea of Gnosticism being that, so it's an ancient heresy, right? And it had adopted these ideas of Platonic thought, where the spiritual is good and the physical is
everything
bad.
Physical is bad. Your body's a tomb, your body's a prison, need to be liberated. And then because of that, I think you had a spectrum of Gnostic, like practical expressions where you'd some who are pure hedonists, my body's worthless, I can treat it however I want. And then you had the really weird aesthetic versions of it. And you can see that all over the church and even our modern culture, right? Where like people are hedonists, they abuse their body, they do whatever they want with it. So for me, one of the core tenets of what it was like for me so I had this deep crisis of faith. I was brought up in the church, catechized at a young age. We did Burkhoff's systematic theology for family devotions. We did, when I was in Sunday school, you're learning about loaves and fish, and then I'm learning like Greek words for father and what the fatherhood of God means, and what like heresies around like the father, like whatever it was.
Simple stuff.
Patripassionalism.
Yeah, And so then I was like, okay, I know all this stuff. Yeah. Why does my life feel so 4, 5, 6 out of 10? So mediocre. My Christianity, none of the promises are coming through. I was an alcoholic at the time. I was suicidal. It was just like the dark thing. So the book opens, I'm drunk at 5 a.m. before work, cycling into the office, hoping that some streetcar is going to derail, do the thing I'm too afraid to do. And that moment, and I'd done that many, many times, but this particular morning, the nausea of a hangover felt more like I was just repulsed with where my life had gotten. And the ancient church has this idea of every sin or act of virtue you do, sin decreates you, it makes you less and less human until you cease to exist almost entirely. And then every act of virtue is part of that recreation, that theosis or union or sanctification, doesn't matter how you want to frame it. And so I got to this part of like my own rock bottom. And then part of the journey was trying to assess like what had got me there, there's nothing big, there's no big sins, there's no like, and then moments or like, hey, I had embezzled this or lied and done this. It's just like, what happens when you make the mediocre decision 100 times a day for a decade, like death by 1,000 cuts. Exactly. And this idea of I had removed the body, my actual physical body, and what God intended my body to be, and then I demanded the function of life. And I was like, I learned there's no way I could do that.
Yeah.
I resonate with that in the sense of, I think there was this kind of idea of this cultural Gnosticism, or even this like theological, it wasn't that many years ago where there was a very prominent, I won't necessarily name drop, but like speaker, apologist, theologian who was giving this talk, and he said, you aren't a body that has a spirit, you're a spirit that has a body. And I was like, no.
Totally.
No, those things are inseparable. And what it ultimately denies is that our hope is in the resurrection.
Totally.
And that God himself is embodied. Like Jesus is the God-man. And to say that is to actually, I would go far as saying as commit a Christological heresy.
Completely.
In that, what are we saying about Jesus? When we're saying that, this life really doesn't matter, this body really doesn't matter, this, world really doesn't matter. No, God stepped into that and is going to renew that. And it doesn't mean that this is just,
worthless.
It's not just a beta version.
Totally.
BETA.
Yeah.
Where it's like, no, this was the world that God intended to create. It wasn't a mistake.
Totally. And you can trace that, so one of the things for me, very pivotal in my understanding of all these things, it comes later in the book, but I mentioned it earlier. The thing I wish I knew when I was going through this is John Paul II's theology of the body. The visible reveals the invisible. Your body reveals your soul.
Yeah.
And the church has always believed that Christ, even if Adam and Eve didn't fall, hypothetically, Christ would have always become incarnated because the visible reveals the invisible. So when Jesus says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, it's because through his body and his living, we're invited and we get to participate in the divine life. And when God calls creation good, I think we add that little asterisk, be like, yeah, but you shouldn't do this. It'd be like, no, what if you just enjoyed good gifts the way you should?
Yeah.
What if like you use them as God intended them, which was to orient your body, your life, your whole complete person towards the source.
Yeah.
Right? These things are gateways. These things are invitations. And when we cut that off, and it can be as simple as like when you don't eat a steak. I feel like when you eat a steak, your prayer in life should respond when you say, oh man, so good. You should just have this note of thankfulness. This is a good gift.
Right.
Yeah.
And this reflects in somehow my creator.
Yeah.
Who delights to give good gifts.
Yeah, I think there are extremes, right? And our nature of humanity is to swing that pendulum one way or the other.
Overcorrection.
It's either like I'm an ascetic and I deny all of that and I go out into the desert and I, starve myself and I beat myself and because all those things are bad.
Yeah.
The passions and pleasures of this world. Or I'm a hedonist.
Totally.
And even because I was reading Augustine. Yes. Yeah. Augustine's Confessions where he's talking about this, where he was, a hedonist, and all of a sudden he realizes, oh, it's not that those things are good or bad. These things were created, sex was created for something.
Yeah.
And actually that desire is a good thing, but the perversion is the lust.
Yes.
And the perversion is the gluttony. And the perversion is, but it doesn't mean that any of those things are bad. And the Spurgeon quote, I'm going to smoke a cigar for the glory of God tonight. Where, not condoning tobacco use or whatever, but you understand what he's saying there, right? In that there's an aspect of pleasure that is a good God-ordained thing, which is why the Psalms talk about, drink wine because it makes the heart glad.
Totally. And it's one of those powerful things. So sorry, Troy.
No, go ahead.
One of these powerful things where like the Christian philosophy is the one that cuts through, like the functional. It's not a middling response, right? It's not just like a balance between asceticism and hedonism. It's like a demolishing and a refounding of like good gifts oriented and used in their proper context. Like Lewis's loving first things first and second things second allows you to enjoy them maximally. And so this idea for me was to paint the picture. When I write the book, there's all these things of like, it's not up and to the right. I make tons of mistakes, tons of falling. I don't know how to use my body.
Yeah.
There's tons of times where I'm like, I feel like a stumbling infant being like, how do I use this thing? So like, I don't know about you guys, but when I grew up, it was like, don't trust your emotions.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. Now I think to myself, hold up. If I'm loving the wrong things, that is a signpost to be like, Josh, something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
If you have the desire for sex and it's going towards lust, what's the disconnect?
Yeah.
But if you have a desire towards sex and intimacy with your wife, fan that into flame.
Yeah.
That's the intended thing. And so like the remove the organ, demand the function is if you bring the organ back, you can function properly as intended. And so Lewis's idea of like men without chest, you want courage, you want virtue, you want goodness. How do you have those things? The incarnation.
Yeah.
Like truth incarnated is virtue.
So then for the person who, wrestles with this idea now, it's like, okay, well, the Bible tells me to kill my flesh. And so all these fleshly desires, and where does the disconnect happen and how do they find their way back?
I think for me, when I was in seminary, we read John Owen's Mortification of Flesh. And a lot of it resonated initially because it was this intellectual thing. It's very easy to say these intellectual ideas. So in the book, I tell a few stories to help give it legs. So there's this one night we're writing, I'm in seminary, we're writing paper on Moses' song. And at TBS, there's like these desks for master students and the school is small. So they left us the keys, like when you're done in the library, lock up. And it's me and this one guy who you definitely know, Wes. And he leans over to me. It's like 8:00 at night. He leans over to me and says, Josh, are you hungry? And I'm like, oh yeah, bro, I could. And then he says to me, oh, not me. I'm just feasting on this passage. And I was like, okay, dude, I'm going to go get a beer and a burger. You've just coaxed me. But I think there's this idea that spiritual goods,
Yeah.
whatever. And so this idea of putting sin to death, I kind of roast, and I did like mortification of the body. I kind of roast Owens a bit in the book to say, there's this, and people amend it, the vivification of virtues. But when you pressed it, when I started pressing it and say like, what does it look like to kill lust? What's putting it to life? What am I putting to life? The answers I continue to get were like, put sin to death. It was always a putting to death. And so I think what happened for me was recognizing that if I was going to put virtue to life, I needed to read people. I need to read about the virtues. I need to understand the virtues, and I need to put them in their proper context, which is in order to put sin to death, I need to embody the virtues.
Yeah.
And you'll be stumbling and it won't make sense at first. And I think the reward system is different. You get this intellectual reward system of memorizing a definition, of a verse, of understanding a new concept. But when you start living a life of generosity, it doesn't feel the same way as thinking a thought about generosity.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to teach your body that generosity or humility or chastity are valuable and worthwhile.
Yeah.
But if you do what Paul says, like you beat your body, you make it your slave, so you don't disqualify yourself from the prize, then your body becomes this tool to say like, oh, I know what the path is. If I tell myself that humility always triumphs over pride, or that like kindness and peace over wrath and anger, then I know that I can start shaping my body to be what it will be like in the life to come.
Yeah, I love that you're pointing out that this beating my flesh isn't, it's also the intellectual side of my flesh. It's also the way I look at the world and the way I analyze the world. Because I think sometimes when, I remember at least growing up in youth group or every men's ministry, it was always like, man, kill your flesh so you don't lust. Or, don't look at porn. It was like all these very specific things that, every young man's battle, like those books and stuff. But I think there's a lot of people that don't also put their upbringing, their thought life, their ideologies through that same fire. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things I love about so much in this book that you actually address is, one of the things you say is, I thought I was living a purposeful life because I could explain it, but that's not purpose. It's narrative, it's description. And it was my tendency to reduce everything to method, to information, to talk about things. Growing up, the loss of childlikeness is about losing the freedom to enjoy something without explaining it, to experience something without needing to justify it.
Yeah.
You ever get close like that and you're like, Dan, I ate.
Yeah, bro. Every once in a while, like you get lucky. I don't legit believe in the muses, but there are these moments where you write something, you're like, yeah, that wasn't me. This is the Holy Spirit. But that one of those things, like I remember. So the way the book is framed is like, these people did shape. So Lewis writing on imagination and narrative, like in his book, An Experiment on Criticism, he has this thing like, we shouldn't judge books by their technicality. We should judge books by how often we want to go back and live in them. Oh, wow. And so this one for me, he talks about how we often prize maturity, but we don't grieve the things we lose that we should be trying to get back. We will get back on the other side, which is like a child's like infinite ability to wonder, right? So like Ransom, he sees a rainbow. He's big into rainbows right now. They don't make sense to him.
Ransom is his son.
Yeah, that's my oldest son, 2.
Oldest son.
And so when he's in the crib, like at night, he'll be like, the big rainbow's sleeping. I'll be like, yeah, he's sleeping. He's not out right now. But I'll be like, what did you dream about last night? It's like the big rainbow.
The big rainbow.
The big rainbow is there. And I was, but so it's just, and Chesterton talks about like, Chesterton has this amazing quote where he's like, what if our God is younger than us? What if every morning God our Father feels the same childlike joy at creating a brand new sunrise? But if every flower is created in the moment, and just like a child can say, throw me up one more time, throw me up one more time, one more time. What if our God is younger than us and says, just one more sunrise, one more sunset, one more flower, one more wine?
I mean, this is a very Lewisian idea. You see it in the Chronicles of Narnia. Yes. Susan grows up and forgets. And in the last battle, she's not there.
Yeah.
And like, it's supposed to be sad because she like mocks her siblings. Oh, you're still into that old Narnia thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, that old Narnia thing?
Yeah.
That was more real than our world.
Yeah, totally.
But I've been thinking a lot about this lately in terms of the virtue thing you were just talking about previously, in that, like, we look at these things which really are the watering, and whatever that is, that's the Bible reading, that's the theological memorization, that's the, understanding the ancient Christological heresies. And believe me, that's my like bread and butter.
Yeah.
If anybody actually gets something from that, it's me. But you see Jesus when he's looking at the religious leaders of the day, who are the people who know the things and are doing the things, and that's the water. And they're being judged by the plant that's being watered.
Yeah.
And it's not that the water is bad.
Yeah.
Right? The water is giving the life to the tree, but ultimately it's the fruit. Mm-hmm. And if we only judge by the water and the quality of the soil, we're actually missing the point that the tree doesn't exist because of the nutrients.
Yeah.
The tree exists to make that apple, pear, fig, orange. And that's actually what you want from the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody is so preoccupied with look how good the clarity of the water is.
Totally.
And that's those things, right? And like I said, not a bad thing. Those
very
things are
good.
things you should be doing. But you see Jesus in that he says simultaneously, you need to be more virtuous than the Pharisees.
Yeah.
And these Pharisee guys really
Take it
are missing the mark.
Yeah.
Totally. And
Yeah.
what's crazy, so I love that. So we were talking on the car ride over of like, you have the things that get nerdy for a second. So you have the transcendentals,
Let's
and
go.
Peter Crave talks about how you have this ontological thing, which is God as being. He's a Catholic philosopher, so God as being, leading to truth, leading to goodness, leading to beauty.
So ontology, the philosophical idea of being.
Of being.
Something exists.
Exactly. But then he talks about how you can experience these transcendentals psychologically. Beauty, and the more you pursue beauty, it leads into goodness, leads into truth, leads into God.
Yeah.
And what we were saying was often the disconnect is what you have is you have people who only spend their life in the realm of truth, the life of the mind,
Yeah.
or only these people who take in as much beauty as possible, but the disconnect is always around virtue. It's very hard to live a virtuous life. And when Jesus, like I think about this almost every day, like, Lord, didn't like we do this in your name? He's like, I never knew you.
Very sobering.
Like, when
Yeah.
did we see you in prison? When did we see you thirsty? Like when you talk about the fruit, I'm not a utilitarian and I'm not like a pragmatist, but the idea of if fruit is good, roots are good. Like, and all truth is God's truth, all virtue is God's virtue, whatever. And so I fundamentally agree with you. I think that all of these other things allow us to live a life of virtue primarily. So like if I spend, not to the same extent as you, not as well educated, but I spend all of my life reading and writing and consuming these things. This is my life. I love this stuff. And I have this concept of I don't want to be like a Christian bulimic where I take things in and I don't process it and I just regurgitate it. I don't want to be an anorexic where I don't take anything in. I want to be a person who consumes and lives and puts into practice. And so there are times where I'll like take seasons. I'll be like, I'm not going to read any books. I can't read any more books. I can't put this into practice. I'm not.
Except for this one.
Go check that one. Josh
Like,
Nadeau.
yeah,
Here's the
Josh
link.
Nadeau, don't forget that.
Here's the link.
But it was the same in seminary. I had this really dark period where I was like, I wasn't doing anything devotional. I was like crushing the Greek, writing all these papers, learning more than I'd ever learned. Yeah, I couldn't parse a single thing if my life depended on it. Now it's been so long, dude. My brother was talking about principal parts, and I was like, please don't.
Yeah.
Please don't. Those are not, I get nightmares.
Yeah,
I get
it's true.
nightmares.
It's true. The flashcards.
But like this idea of like, what if I embodied the truth as deeply and profoundly as I could? And what if that was my whole life? And what if what I learned always had expression, not just with my mouth, but with my life?
Yeah.
And I think that's what Jesus is all about.
Are you lost and stumbling through your Bible reading plan?
We can help. We have a brand new reading plan on YouVersion Bible app.
It's based on AC's Can I Trust the Bible series. You don't want to miss out. Go check it out.
Wes, you won't believe it.
What?
Can I Trust the Bible? Episode 1, over 1 million views.
Yes!
Have you ever been to Israel
I
or
want to
Jordan?
go. I want to go.
Okay.
Next time you guys go, please
On
take
the
me.
list.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
please
right.
take me.
So I haven't actually been to Israel, but I've been to Jordan a few times in my life. And one thing that really struck me about that area of the world is that the Jordan River runs into two bodies of water, the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
And the reason why the Sea of Galilee is teeming and full of life and the Dead Sea is dead is because one takes in the sediment and the salt and holds onto it, and one takes it in and it goes out, right? It goes out back
It's right
into.
there. Yeah.
And that's when I hear these types of things that you're talking about, that's always the illustration that I think of when I was standing in front of the Dead Sea and looking at the like headwaters that went into the same headwaters that go into this other body of water. And one is the place that the fishermen go to, and one is the place that is known for not holding any life because it is just so salty.
Yeah.
And there's you can use different sermon illustrations.
Yeah, I was about to say my little preacher brain is going right now.
But that's really what it is.
Yeah.
It's like God fills your cup not so that you can figure out how full you can keep that
stuffed
cup,
up.
but
Yeah.
it's supposed to overflow.
It has to.
And the overflow, no matter what that is, whether it's the emotionalism or the intellectualism or the pragmatism or the whatever, is supposed to be an outpouring into the life of others, knowing that without God doing that to you, you're empty.
Yes. I love that.
And that kind of gets to actually something we were talking about on the way here, where I was getting challenged by this idea of, say you look at things very intellectually, right? But without testimony, without actually lived experience of those things, it just that's exactly what happens. You're just like this petrified pillar, right? That just, I'm here, I've experienced a lot, but I've got no way of articulating it, and really living it out.
You're encrusted with sediment.
Yeah.
Totally. And that's how we learn, right? So in the book, so after like this rock bottom moment, I didn't know what the next right step was, because I knew that if I just did what I'd always done, I was going to end back at like rock bottom again, but maybe worse this time. And so I started thinking to myself about what is the next right step? Literature was a big help to me because I'd seen all my heroes hit rock bottom, and you just have to do the next right thing. But one of the really good ones was I just got back into martial arts. I got back into boxing. Nice. I remember having these moments of like, you spar, you're bottom of the hierarchy, you do sparring, like split lips, headaches, whatever. And then after a few months, less split lips, less headaches. But that's because I would do something and my coach is watching and I'm learning. He's not just, you can watch videos about boxing, you can read books about boxing, but until you get in the ring. I started thinking, what if I just did all of my life like this? What if I learned with my body? And the way that I conceive of it, that's why I like the subtitle, Ordinary People Becoming Everyday Saints. I think the purpose of life is to become a saint. And my conception of what that is that's to be the best Christian you can possibly be. So like you live your whole life oriented towards God, and we call that worship. But like sainthood is an identity, and the saints are our heroes, right? Like this is the life you emulate. And I think the way into sainthood is virtue, but it's also like the mechanisms for me that I want to communicate were like beauty and wonder. So this is no shade on you. I love what Apologetics Canada is doing. But I think there's people on the street where like, think like, for example, Wes, what you're doing online, there's big, deep questions people are asking.
Yes.
And they need real answers too.
Yeah.
And then there's like this other level of like, people need new stories. They need better stories. They need to be shown. So one of my friends who I know in the city, he's like big part of like hookup culture. And he's like, I feel dead. I feel empty. I hate doing this. He's like, I want what you and your wife have. Because what you're living is beautiful. And I was like, yeah, like this is the apologetic.
Yeah.
Beauty is also an apologetic.
Yeah.
It's an invitation into the life you wish you could live.
Yeah.
And not that my wife and I are perfect, but we're doing our best to embody virtue as deep as we can as an invitation into fulfilling your purpose, which is to be an imager, to be a saint. And I think that this idea of like using your body to do so, that's how we interact with everyone.
Yeah.
Right? Our brains, unless you guys are into like the telepathy tapes, you don't need to get too deep. But our brains aren't talking, like our bodies are interacting right now.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very beautiful way of connecting.
You know what I have found interesting though? You mentioned like the interviews that I've been doing and the opportunities that I've had. They all start out, hey Wes, tell us about biblical manuscripts.
Oh,
Yeah.
And
every time.
all of them end with something metaphysical.
Yes.
They do.
Yeah.
The Rogan one, the PBD one, the Flagrant one, the, even something, sorry, I'm name dropping.
No, but hold on. You're on a run right now.
Even if people go back and watch the first few minutes and then the last few minutes of these things, the trajectory of the conversations go from that kind of a little bit more heady, like, oh, this is what Wes is known for, to asking questions about pain and suffering and identity and what do we do with people who are unsaved in a worldview that claims that Jesus is the only way. Those are the really nitty-gritty. And every time I hear someone review these conversations I'm having, they all say, and the last 40 minutes is if you're going to listen to anything, go listen to the last 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting that you create this rapport and then the things that actually matter start to rise to the surface because those are, I think people have these other intellectual questions, but sometimes those are like self-induced barriers.
Yeah.
But really what's behind them is a lot of these other things where they're struggling because we live in a beautiful yet broken world.
Totally.
And they understand those components and they're trying to wrestle through them.
I think you're like become defense mechanisms. They become a way like I don't need to deal with the questions about purpose, meaning, identity, virtue, like why my life is falling apart. If I can say, if God, why bad thing? Right? Oh, got you, Christians.
Yeah, or translation of translation of translation.
Yeah. Oh, got me.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
Like the Reddit brain style thing. But those are like stand-ins for like the deeper things. And so that's where I think for me, what I wanted to do is show and not tell. I want to like write a narrative because the thing that beauty and art and film and story and all these things do is they get in underneath rationalism, our mental defense, and they start speaking to your heart before your head and mind can like come up with all these excuses.
Yeah.
And what I really wanted to do was say, listen, I'll be as honest as I can. I'll show as broken as I've been. And if I can show as bad as things were for me, it gives people this like, okay, I don't have to have my guard up reading this book because this guy was like the biggest hypocrite. And I think those become ways that then you can show this path of what it is to ask the question around meaning, identity, and purpose without the defense mechanisms kicking in of like, oh yeah, but Josh, what about this thing? What about this theological idea? Be like, no one cares if you're telling them the story and they're going along for the ride.
Yeah, no, that's really well said. And it really makes me think that we just need to start asking better questions and not stop at the first one. Because I think sometimes, like, there's an interaction in here with you and one of your friends, right? And you guys are, you're sitting at a table and you guys are in the pub and you're having this whole conversation and he just starts hitting you with just phrasing, just like typical phrasing. And I think how you put it, he was using verses, like Bible verses, like they were incantations.
Totally.
That kind of thing. And I think when a person doesn't start asking better questions and given room to ask better questions, that's where we get stuck. And we just hope that it works out. And sometimes it's chance, sometimes it's God, sometimes it's just opportunity. And that was one of the things I can definitely say, like, I really enjoyed about how you were unpacking that, because I think for a lot of believers in particular, and I think this is what's been cool watching even the conversations you're having. You watch the conversations that Andrew Schultz has, or that you're having, the questions he's asking are ones that I wonder what would happen if more believers started asking that same question while doing the things.
Totally.
It's one thing to write a book and, you're having moments where, I don't know if you, for example, as a recording artist, I make some music and then I sometimes will go and I'll listen to it back. I'm like, dang, this is good. But then there's also moments that really hit me where I'm like, this was written from a very real place. So for you in the book, is there a favorite part? What would be the favorite part for you in the story?
Yeah, I think there's this little passage of our time in Spain. So my wife and I, after I quit my job, one thing led to another. You can read the book. We ended up in England. We ended up in Spain. And that was like a culminating season. So like a lot of things you learn, you live through, and things start falling into place slowly. So there was this hermitage on the other side. We lived in Calpe. There was this hermitage on the other side of the city, and I wanted to go do the walk, say the prayer. And I was hoping for this lightning bolt moment. So you show up, the city's beautiful, it's hot. And when you get to the Hermitage of San Salvador, there's like this circling walkway all the way up to the top, but the sun had scorched all the vegetation. So I'm expecting something beautiful, and you have like thickets and brush. And as you walk up, there's beautiful winding cement pathways with mosaic white stones in them. And off to the side are stone pillars and stone frames, and it's the Stations of the Cross. So you're supposed to prepare yourself as you go up by considering like the death and resurrection of Jesus. And so I'm cooking hot. I'd walk through the city, walking up, and then I go into the Hermitage, and it's nice and cool. It smells ancient, like old earth. You kneel before the cross. I say my prayers, and I'm expecting like heaven to peel open, trumpets sound, like this, like, God, look how long this journey has been. Wouldn't it just be great if you told me everything I needed to know? And so I'm there for a little while, and there's just nothing. And I'm like, I'm no amateur. I know. You wait linger a little longer in my presence. And, you know what I mean? Do like,
Why
God
are you
is
in a
in the
rush,
whisper.
Josh? Why are you in a rush?
Yeah, why are you in a rush? And there was nothing. So I get up, make the sign of the cross, and I leave. And then walking back into the sun, I feel like you know when you're cold and your skin tightens? I feel my skin relax. I feel my shoulders drop. And I feel like living in the sun that was once like beating down upon me is now giving me new life. And I'm walking back, and that sounds like an and then. That sounds like a little take a platitude and call me in the morning. But it's this experience thing of, you know what? I'm going to go back about my life and live in the light of the S-O-N, the sun, and it will just be okay. And it was this moment of like, I don't need the big and then moments. I actually think the big and then moments, you shouldn't orient your life around them. You should orient, instead of death by 1,000 cuts, it's just life by 1,000 steps. Like, just enjoy.
That's good.
And so that to me was this culmination of like, my whole life could just be this embodied community, this little pilgrimage, and just living by the light. And then that night we just went, we made like stir fry, had dinner on the med. I smoked a cigar. I am pro tobacco. Had some Spanish wine. And it was a beautiful thing where you just think to yourself like, this is simple, local. This is me and my wife and good gifts in their proper order.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, yeah. That for me was the thing that put all these disparate ideas together in a way that I had to live like the book is not over a weekend. It's like a 5-6 year journey.
Yeah.
The beauty of the ordinary is, I think, something that right now is probably what our culture needs to hear.
100%.
Because we live in this age of influencers.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to be an influencer. And I think that may bleed over into, I want to be Abraham called out into the desert. Not realizing the,
the
Do
you
stress
really?
of that.
Yeah.
But I want to be Moses. I want to meet God at the burning bush.
Yeah.
And what we hype up is what we think that would be, rather than, the stress and panic and sheer just kind of fear of Moses being like, no, not me, God.
Yeah, totally.
But if you actually look throughout the whole narrative of Scripture, a lot of the callings are very general.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To walk humbly, to love mercy, to love justice, to,
Live a quiet life.
live a quiet life. Yeah.
There's a section on the book about like, we want to save the world using the tools of the world. We think like to be a pastor, we have to have we have to be something, we have to be someone. Yeah. And so you're like, oh yeah, I need like this many clicks, I need this many followers. If I'm gonna be a worship leader, I have to have this many platinum albums, whatever it is, like the myth of the main character. So there's a big section on the holy ordinary, like your life, your best life it's within the life you're living now. If you just said yes to the invitations all around you. And I so agree. Like this idea of like, we want to be like the prophetic voice calling out in the wilderness and be like, do you want to get beheaded by Herod?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
is that really
Yeah.
what you want to do? What if you just were like a really good mom,
Yeah.
a really good truck driver?
Yeah.
What if you're just like faithful to your wife and your kids and your church and these small ordinary things? What if everything you did was an invitation to another person to live a life after Christ, to become a saint?
That's what you're really saying. It's count the cost. some of the things we're asking the Lord for, these things that we're banging on heaven for. I've written it down in my journal. It's on my vision board. Have you counted the cost though? Right. And that's why you see these people were called. I think that's what is the big difference. It's like nowadays we think that, okay, well, if I put myself in the right positions and posture, then I'll get a good connection to God and he can hear me. But it's me calling God for what I have called purpose, what I've called my calling, so to speak. But when you read in scripture, these people were called, and many of them, some of them didn't want anything to do with it. They're like, I didn't want that.
It also feels so pagan. And like, I mean that in the fame feels like the atheist version of eternal life. You know what I mean? We're like, and then for Christian, it'd be like your
they call
identity.
it immortalized for a reason, right? You're immortalized.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you get your 15 minutes and be like, maybe I'll be remembered.
They'll build a statue outside of a stadium for you, right? Like
one of my favorite quotes, Count Zinzendorf, is preach the gospel, die and be forgotten.
Be forgotten.
And it's because, ironically, we remember him for that quote. But sorry, so, like my grandfather passed away a couple weeks back, and the guy was just a very steadfast, faithful, quiet, never graduated high school, worked a very blue-collar job on the Great Lakes and the ships, just was steadfast, steady, faithful, and was known for that. He never wanted to be rich. He never wanted to be famous. He didn't have a lot of money or means or exposure. And you see a room full of people at his funeral. This room is full.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is not a famous person.
Yeah.
Of real lives touched.
Yeah.
Right?
Real
like
lives.
the one thing I wish, like I think fame is just such a lie. Like you can listen to anyone who's famous, they all say like it doesn't satisfy, right? You just want more and more and more and more. That's like what the grave says in Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. They just say more and more. And like these things, they can't satisfy. And you think to yourself, like, what about the real lives touched? Like you'll be forgotten in a generation or two.
Yeah.
Right? Like, will your kids remember their great grandfather or their kids? No. So you have this momentary life. You're not the main character of the story. Jesus is, thank God. You can't maintain that kind of narrative arc with your 80 years max. But then like, I think it was N.T. Wright who said like, you should count it an honor to be on stage with the main event, even for a moment.
Jesus.
As a supporting actor, like to point towards Christ and have like, your grandfather touching real people's lives. He didn't touch everyone in the world, but his local community, people who show up, you're like, okay, what's more real than that?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I get emotional thinking about those things because I had touch and go with health. And I want on my epitaph, just be like, just a man of love. That's all I want. I remember thinking when it was touch and go, I was like, was I though to the people close? Like my wife, yes, my kids, yes, whatever. But like, the community, would they say it when I'm gone, when they don't have to be like, oh yeah, Josh, you did this stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like who's going to show up at the funeral? And I don't like the idea of legacy. I'm sorry for ranting. I think legacy is another stand-in. I think these things are stand-ins for real life touched. I don't think your grandfather was concerned about legacy. I think he was concerned about loving the people around him. And because he did that first, legacy, he touched real people.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this, and I it's funny because I can hear the comments, I can hear the thoughts of people. What do you mean legacy? What, like people will remember you to a certain bit, and I'm like, okay, but hold on, hear what's being said. Legacy in the sense of, man, he was a man of faith.
Mm-hmm. Or not chasing it for its own sake.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's not an ends to a means. If God chooses to make your life testimony great and impactful, by all means, that's a blessing. But I think the way you put it, Josh, was really good in saying that that's the pagan chasing after eternal life.
Yeah,
totally.
I think that's exactly the quintessential way of putting it, because if you do not understand the profundity of what eternal life really means and why Jesus came to be served and not to serve, like the creator of the universe stepping off his eternal throne and becoming a servant. We talked about this a few times when we've done Christmas episodes, but we are so used to seeing the manger scene that we forget that that's the first century Jewish equivalent of a urinal stall.
Yeah.
Like it's not, everybody would have read that or heard that and winced in that, like, this is a place that is physically unclean. It's like ritualistically unclean because it's around animals.
Yeah.
And there's just a kind of ick about it, especially to give birth. Like something that should require a level of sanitization. Even in the ancient world, like they didn't understand modern germ theory, but they were still like, don't give birth.
Yeah, it's a bit gross.
We may not have sanitizer, but
and
that's
yet
gross.
That's the creator of the universe, is how he chose to do that. And that's just so countercultural to fame at any level. Fame for ancient emperors or fame for modern influencers.
Totally.
It's good.
Megachurch. Like one of the stories in the book is I remember going to one of these conferences and there's like a mixer at first. I was very underdressed. I was like a skateboarder at the time. So I had my jeans, my hoodie, and I skateboarded over from the conference to this like after hours thing. And it was in an old museum put on by like the big money of the Southern Baptists. And you do like a little mixing and mingling, and all these people were talking about legacy. And I just kept asking these questions, and I was skateboarding back to the motel I was staying at with friends. It was one of those old motels where like your balcony was just that really wide like patio thing, and it was all the white chairs. Remember the old plastic white chairs? The bugs flying around the lights. And I was asking them about like, what do you think the purpose of your life is? Like, what do you want to leave? Do you want to leave? And we just echoed this idea of legacy. And I couldn't help but shake. If it's in the backwards order, it's like the lust of the eyes, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, money, sex, power. It's this thing of like, I have to leave a mark. That version of life, that version of like disordered loves, I think that's part of like the death by 1,000 cuts. If you do that, that slowly unmakes you. You put yourself first, your legacy first, rather than a life of love.
Yeah. Well, Josh, this has been a really good conversation, and I know for a fact that we could keep going. But
5 hours.
5 hours. Quick 5-hour podcast. But if people wanted to stay connected with you, have any, like I want to follow what he's doing. You got any different things coming up? Is there another book? Is there a project you're doing?
Yeah.
What's the best way to keep track of you?
You can follow me on Instagram at Sword and Pencil. I have a Substack called Everyday Saints. I have some things I'm contractually not allowed to talk about, but a coffee table book and then another book.
Very cool.
And the book is?
Yeah. Room for Good Things to Run Wild.
Yeah.
How ordinary people become everyday saints.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys, for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, man. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning into the AC Podcast. My name is Troy, here with Wes and Josh. And make sure you tune in next week. Subscribe. And you know the drill. You know the motto. Love God. Love people. Bye for now.